afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to our returning viewers. Or if you're just joining us, my name is Kate Thompson from NOAA's Office of National Marine Sanctuaries, and I'm your host for this lunch session of Capitol Hill Ocean Talk on Oceans Live at CHOW 2015, live from the museum in Washington, D.C. In this panel, we will examine how ocean planning can diffuse conflicts between the various users of regions' coastal waters and turn those former conflicts into win-win scenarios that help to maximize the value of our oceans. With us is Jason Blau, a project manager with Redstone Strategy Group, LLC in Colorado. Since graduating from Yale, Jason has worked extensively with foundations, NGOs, and governments on economic development and conservation policy projects. We also have with us Jen McCann. She is the Director of Coastal Programs at the University of Rhode Island's Coastal Resources Center. Among her many achievements for the Ocean Conservancy and Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary, Jen was the co-leader for the development and implementation of the Rhode Island Ocean Special Area Management Plan, or Ocean SAMP, the first formally adopted ocean spatial plan in the nation. And last, but certainly not least, we have Rich Innes, a senior fellow at the Meridian Institute. At Meridian, Rich develops and implements high-profile projects in the areas of ocean and coastal policy, energy, climate, and forest management, with figures like Meridian Board Chair member William D. Ruckelhaus and organizations like the State of Washington. Thank you so much for joining me today in the studio. Can't wait to discuss this great topic of ocean planning. So, Jason, you recently published a paper in Marine Policy. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And it actually assessed the impact of the 5 ocean plans around the world, including the Special Area Management Plan, or Ocean SAMP, in Rhode Island. What 5 and how did you choose the plans and the reports, and why?
Sure, and thank you so much for having me today. So we looked at Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Belgium, Norway, and the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. And we kind of guessed, just thinking about what those plans are, there are a lot of geographic diversity from all around the world, but also plans have been in place for a while, since our goal was to see, there's a lot of theoretical literature out there, what actually happened. So we wanted to look at the plans that have been in place for a while.
So from your report, you were able to quantify some economic benefits. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
We were. Over those 5 plans, and we did look at a few besides as well, just to make sure we weren't cherry picking, but just in those 5 plans, we saw $300 million per year in new economic activity coming out of them. And that was largely concentrated in the offshore wind industry. I think because offshore wind is the new user, they had the most to gain. So that's Belgium and Rhode Island where we saw that. At the same time, that new economic activity did not come at the cost on the whole of the existing ocean users. So we calculated around $4.1 billion per year in just maintained economic activity, largely out of fishing, both commercial and recreational, and then specifically in the Great Barrier Reef, a very large tourism industry.
So the draw obviously isn't just the economics of it, but what about the environmental or cultural benefits?
Sure. So on the environmental side, those depended on what the goals of the plan were. I imagine that's something we'll talk about today, is the way you're able to use an ocean plan to get what you want out of it. They ranged from, in the Great Barrier Reef, protecting in various ways nearly 100% of the reef, to around 2/3 of that in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, and less in Europe. Thinking across those 5 plans, it moved from an average of around 10 or 11% protection to 50%. So that's a pretty significant swing when it comes to the environment, and that's looking broadly at marine protected areas all the way down to just keeping industrial uses out of where they shouldn't be.
Yeah. So Jen, you're pretty lucky. One of your project was chosen by Jason, and they took a close look at it.
I think we were lucky to.
Yeah, definitely. So can you tell us about your role in creating the Ocean SAMP and the greatest challenge you faced in doing it?
Sure. I would say the biggest challenge was actually how we started. So in 2007, our governor and the state wanted to promote a new industry, and that was offshore renewable energy. New England is considered the Saudi Arabia of wind, and this was an industry we felt could add value to our state. So there was a facilitated small stakeholder process, and based on existing information, there were proposed sites that were put out there to the public, and these sites were potentially in high-use areas for shipping, for sailboat racing, for fishing, both commercial and recreational fishing, and very close to our shore. we are the ocean state, and these are the things that make us who we are. And so there was a lot of question as far as, is this already a done deal? That people are making decisions for the people of Rhode Island, and this is going to affect who we are. So our coastal program suggested to the governor that we used a tried and true tool in Rhode Island called a Special Area Management Plan. And it's an opportunity to look at an area comprehensively, look at the environmental aspects, the use aspects, to figure out where are the best places to be put. So that was our biggest challenge, because people thought it was a done deal. Our role as the University of Rhode Island was, we've been around for many, many years. My organization has been around for 40 years. We've been able to build trust and strong relationships amongst the people of Rhode Island. So we were asked to facilitate this entire process. We were supposed to do it in 2 years, which is not typical of a special area management plan, and to ensure that people had a place at the table, that they were able to learn, and that they their issues and concerns were responded to in this process. For URI, we are a state entity. However, our job was not necessarily to find where to put the wind turbine. It was to determine, is there a place to put the wind turbine, and if so, how should it be managed? And we continually said that. So we had to, again, there was this impression that it was a done deal, that the turbines were going to go in. At the end, we found out all of these places that were being proposed in the beginning were actually not good sites, either because of the ocean bottom or the wind. Wind is stronger, more offshore. So, so again, the biggest challenge was how we started, and our role was to ensure that science and stakeholder input were integrated and were foremost part of the policy development.
So Jen, let me ask you this. Internationally, it seems that offshore wind energy has been done quite a bit. Why is this so difficult in the United States to get done?
I think you should answer that, Rick. So I do know, in talking with people overseas, offshore wind has been around for many more years. It's been promoted by the government for many years, and it's part of a priority for other countries. So I think people see the value of it there, and it's part of their culture in some ways. Maybe it's not part of our culture.
Yeah.
And it really does go to the whole issue of how many uses do you have for these oceans that really do belong to the American people. You've got competing uses out there, not just wind. You've got a whole lot of interest now in aquaculture. You've got, of course, various kinds of energy development going on. Fishermen, of course, are a huge part of it, recreation. So when you put all of that together, how do you sort through, as a community and as a society, which of those uses are valid and should be put forward, and which should be put somewhere else? And I think that's one of the things that Jen is finding out, and that is so gratifying from the perspective of these collaborative processes to help better organize this, is that it's working. So we're seeing in some of the examples that Jason has outlined, and in Rhode Island and in other places, that we are getting better efficiencies, and we are able to use these processes to build the support that Jen was talking about in the communities, and figure out that maybe it doesn't make sense to put a wind farm right in a prime fishing spot. Maybe there is another place that is a win-win situation for that entire community.
Could I just add, reminded me, is in other countries, the federal government has more, does not necessarily have the tradition, or has not had the tradition of a public process. Right. The federal government has more authority to just put the offshore wind turbines out there, and the end of story. So in the United States, everything's public process, public review, which is wonderful. It's part of what makes our country so wonderful. But it also, in other countries, they don't need to do that. They're not required to do that.
Rich, in your work that you've been doing with the Joint Ocean Commission Initiative, you released a report actually recommending ocean priorities for the current federal administration. Can you discuss, what some of those key federal policies should be?
Well, one of the core reports. And the Joint Ocean Commission, just to, I'm sure you're aware of this, there were two commissions, the U.S. Commission on Ocean Policy, there was the Pew Commission. They came to startlingly similar recommendations. And so the Joint Ocean Commission is the desire on the part of the chairs, who including now Bill Ruckelshaus, Norm Mineta, Leon Panetta as a former chair, Admiral Watkins, to make sure that those are implemented. A core recommendation is that we better plan and manage our ocean and coastal areas. And we're doing it for all kinds of reasons. We're doing it for the wealth of our nation. We're doing it for posterity. And it is, as I said, it's very gratifying to see these begin to take shape now. The federal government has a role in it, but as Jen was just alluding to, it is more of a supportive role of these efforts that have sprung up, in some cases organically, in regions and states and in our estuaries where people care about protecting what's in their backyard. They care about these iconic bodies of water that help define them. And having these processes in place in order to coordinate all the different, it's not just government, it's private sector, it's NGOs, it is local and states, in addition to the federal overlay. We have a responsibility to get all of that right.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the two reports, and in my time in government, I started before those reports, and now we're just kind of waiting to see, is this working? You know, how do we, you mentioned efficiency, how do we increase that when we have change of administration? I mean, that's just the way the U.S. government works. How do we do that? How do we maximize for and get support for ocean planning?
You know, one of the issues, which we don't want to get too much into the weeds here, but no one has known who's on first. So in other words, if you talk to John Bullard, who's now with NOAA, but he did the wind farm, the wind project up in Massachusetts, he will tell you they didn't even know which federal agencies to go to get permits. And so some of that is being sorted out now. But how frustrating, even for industry, to be able to have several federal agencies that they have to check the box of. If those federal agencies can get together and better coordinate so that it is one-stop shopping, that is going to help expedite this. As Jen said, it's going to save money. I mean, time is money. But more than that, it is going to make us more competitive internationally, and it's going to build that support that among communities.
I also think you need to, there's other stakeholders besides the federal government or the state government that need to buy into this and to need to recognize that ocean planning is valuable to them, whether it be a municipality or an industry. In talking with Deepwater Wind, who will be starting to develop and construct the first offshore wind turbines in the United States, they state very clearly that this the ocean stamp process has saved them money. It has saved them going to court. During the permit process and public hearings, you had fishermen and tribes. You had environmental organizations all supporting this offshore wind turbine process because of the ocean SAMP. So you have federal agencies saying that the SAMP saved them 1 to 2 to 3 years through a permitting process. And actually, I had one federal agency person come up to me and say, after the SAMP was done, can I work with you on something else? This was really useful and effective. So you have to make all different types of stakeholders recognize the value of what you're doing so that it can go for years.
So we actually have a question from our audience, our online audience, is how do we make wind power part of our energy culture in the U.S.? We kind of touched on that earlier. Do you have anything to add on that?
I would say we need to make people feel comfortable with it, and that it isn't going to, it is not going to destroy who we are or what we do. This is more culturally and society. We need to be able to explain that it's not, that in many cases, if cited properly, it's not going to destroy the natural environment. Right. In fact, it's going to help us with climate mitigation. We have bigger issues besides you know, the day-to-day issues. Offshore renewable energy is a great way to mitigate climate if it's done enough. So I think it's also, there's a lot of fear that energy, these new tools and techniques are going to impact them. I think we need to bring experiences from Europe to here to talk about, well, how are the electromagnetic fields going to affect the fish, you know, and learn from experiences. I think that's one way of doing it, and that's one way I think that ocean planning is doing it.
Right.
I know there are other ways as well.
Yeah.
No, I think
just to underscore that, Jen, these collaborative processes have the ability, if they are done right, and they're not inexpensive or easy to, you know, as you know, but if they're done right, they can build the support for these kind of projects, not just wind, but a whole plethora of important ocean and coastal projects.
I think that's right. I mean, people have legitimate concerns, you know, whether it's the environment, their view sheds, or just their economic well-being if they're commercial fishermen. And I think what we saw in Belgium was, you know, it was once those concerns were addressed, then the wind farms were able to go up. And so now you've got 700 megawatts of installed wind in the Belgian North Sea. It's a very small area, but it works, and they're building that culture because the ocean plan was able to address the concerns folks had.
Jen, let me ask you this really quickly.
Yes.
So from the beginning of the process to now, how have people from the communities in Rhode Island changed their minds about it?
I think people are, generally speaking, are very proud of the ocean SAMP, that we were able to come together. It wasn't easy, and we did it.
Yeah.
I think formally, our coastal program has used the ocean SAMP as an efficient way of promoting a new industry, which could potentially bring hundreds of new jobs to our state. So I think people are excited about that. I feel that I've seen environmental organizations and the fishing community be empowered, because now the fishing industry, through the SAMP, through a Fishermen's Advisory Board, they have recognition. They have a level playing field with the industry to say, we want you to research this. We want you to monitor this. We need this. And Deepwater Wind, I think, is seeing, you know what? That's great. We want to work with you on this. There's an experience where the environmental organization, Conservation Law Foundation, were able to work directly with Deepwater Wind to ensure that construction schedule was changed so that the right whale, an endangered species, was not significantly impacted. That's an informal implementation of the SAMP. The Conservation Law Foundation feels empowered that they were able to use the SAMP information to make a decision. So I feel people are really proud. I sometimes say the ocean SAMP is a little bit like giving birth. When during the process it's very painful, it's very frustrating, it's scary, the whole thing. Now it's like, I can't wait to have another one. You know, and we are involved in the Northeast regional planning, which I think they use the ocean SAMP as an example. It's a different animal, but there's a lot of benefits to working at that scale.
And Jen, I think your study can remind us that the discussion around ocean planning is far from over.
Correct.
I mean, really, as finalized plans like those in Rhode Island start to be implemented, new challenges are still on the horizon, and potential to quantify unforeseen impacts are there as well. Jason, at the conclusion of your study, did you have any unanswered questions or recommendations for the future for ocean planning and how to assess its impacts?
Well, it really just builds off the question you just asked, which is, you know, we're still in early days here, and so I think as we see more plans come online, and as folks are able to build in just even some basic metrics and monitoring at the start of plans, we'll see a lot more data that comes in. I mean, you know, we were able to look at 5 plans in depth, maybe a half dozen more to a lesser extent. So I think the trends are going to continue. I don't think we're going to start seeing that there's massive problems with ocean plans. But it would be nice to have more data coming in as more plans come online.
Well, Jen, you mentioned the changing of the shipping lanes and all that. I mean, obviously our team at Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary worked really, really hard with universities, partners like yourselves to make that happen. I mean, it was an amazing study and set a huge precedence for how planning can work for the marine mammals and also just for the stakeholders that are involved, and they understand it. I think they get it more. So we actually have another question from our viewers. How can federal, state, and local governments support communities facing coastal flooding?
Excellent question. The leaders of the Joint Ocean Commission initiative are gathering in New York next week to address that very issue. And this is very real, where you see sea level rise happening now, where you see people that are still digging out from the aftermath of these storms. So it is very practical things. Where are you going to put your sewage treatment plant, which was overrun and submerged and underwater, and all of the problems that resulted from that? Moving that to higher ground. How do you ensure that the electric grid is not compromised in the next storm? And what are the engineering problems that need to be addressed there? We're going to have port directors. I mean, port directors are on the front lines of this. You know that down in Norfolk, Virginia, the Navy is underwater, literally. And some of their piers are disappearing. It is a multi-billion-dollar problem that they are addressing there. So a lot of the answer to that is infrastructure. It comes back to planning, and how do we get these plans that are in place that are going to take account of this? Because it's not just mitigation, it's adaptation that we're in that mode of right now.
Yeah,
we do. Oh,
Yeah.
go
I
ahead.
would just mention that I'm so glad to hear Jen say that that the Northeast planning body is already learning lessons from what you did in Rhode Island. That's exactly what's going to help accelerate this. Mid-Atlantic has another very advanced plan in progress, but there are plans going on virtually all around the country that can benefit from that.
We, as far as flooding is concerned, in Rhode Island, we like to samp a lot, and we actually have a shoreline change samp, or we call it the beach samp. And what we're recognizing, it's really the communities that are in the front line of this flooding issue. And what we've been doing is providing them with tools. So how do you make your, where are those vulnerable areas? Next time you change, you have to pave the road. Maybe you should move the road.
Right.
Where are your wetlands migrating? Which ones do you need to protect, and which ones are you going to just let go and drown in place? What about your marinas? We have a marina checklist for to make your marina more resilient. We're working with the industry on this. We have a homeowner's guide, which is a specific tool, 10 questions on how homeowners can make themselves less vulnerable. And when you're thinking about buying that beautiful house that has that beautiful view on the water, here are some questions you might want to ask yourself. So we have a tool called Storm Tools, which you can go online, you can write your address and see, okay, during Sandy, this is what your community looked like, and in fact, your safety places were actually underwater. Your hospitals were underwater, by the way. And we have a lot of people saying, you're right, this is really what happened. So it's to provide them the tools and actions that they can take, so it's not such a scary thing.
Well, let me ask you this, though. So people that live in Arkansas, Iowa, other places, middle America, that say, hurricanes, coastal flooding, those are all the coast problems. They're not my problem. But in our session yesterday with Dr. Holly Bamford, we talked about the fact that no, they are your problem. How about that Amazon Prime account where you're ordering stuff that's coming out of LA, the Port of LA, or the Port of New York, or the Port of Seattle? Right. By the way, you're getting impacted by that coastal flooding if that port can't be accessed. Exactly. So, I think that it's a huge problem, and I think when you think of people and planners and how they encounter the short term, maybe the next 2 years, or even into the long term after 5 years, what do we need? How do we need to overcome public opposition when it comes to this stuff, and getting them to think, you know what, it is about me, it is about my wallet, it is about what I do in my backyard, and not just about those people who want to live on the coast. How do we address that, Rich?
It really does come down to education of the sort that you're talking about, and just realizing that the United States is a maritime nation. That has been our roots, our history, and it remains as true today as ever. And if we are not able to secure our coasts, if we're not able to become more resilient, it is going to impact the economy of this country in ways that everyone from Oklahoma right through to California are going to feel the impacts of very, very quickly. So getting this resource that we have all been given, this is an incredible resource that is in the public trust. The oceans, you have the 3 miles, but then after which are state waters, the rest of the oceans are public trust. And how we get a handle on the serious problems. Ocean acidification is another one which we have not talked about, which has got huge consequences. Sea level rise, extreme weather events, which we are seeing more rapidly now, is got impacts for the entire country. And if we don't take account of that, if New York City goes under again, we had subway systems being flooded there, the economic impacts of that will reverberate instantly across the country.
Yeah.
I think that's right. And the good news is there's also a more positive case to be made, right? Because I think what we're seeing now is there's money left on the table when folks aren't working together to find win-win solutions for things. So one of the interesting things that came out of the Norwegian plan for the Barents Sea is they just moved the shipping lanes just a bit off the coast. And that's resulting in fewer collisions with fishing vessels, I think on the order of 40%, fewer oil spills. And that's not just good for the environment, that's good for folks' bottom line, that's good for the country as a whole. So I do think there are win-wins out there if we want to work together and get them.
Yeah, I think it's really taking the templates that you're all creating, whether it's the SAMP or whether it's other things that we've got going on around the world, to say these are examples. We have to use them. Yeah, they might not work in our community just the same way they worked in Norway, but we can at least say what worked, what didn't work. Let's create a good model to do better planning, to create mitigation, to become more resilient. I think that's a message that we need to take here for sure. But it's really been exciting to hear about ocean planning processes springing up across the country like yours. I'm really excited to see the different types of energy uses and ways that we can work together. The shipping lane movement was so monumental, and we can take what they have done out Stellwagen, use it out on the West Coast with LA and Channel Islands. It's just creating a model and getting communities to buy in is definitely where we need to go for sure. But there are multiple states working together as well. It's not just Rhode Island. Rhode Island, you're setting the tempo for the Northeast. So let's step into play here for sure. So what advice do you all have for regions that are in early stages of creating an ocean plan or interested in starting the process? I guess. Yeah.
I would say you really, so actually this is some of the research we're doing now as far as providing lessons learned. So sharing, building the capacity of practitioners so that they're not reinventing the wheel all over the place, so that there's sharing of seasoned practitioners, but also those emerging practitioners, so that they're not, when they come in to become practitioners, they're not reinventing the wheel because the other guy retired and didn't hear about all the mistakes he or she made. I would say there's a few, so there are a few lessons learned. One is you really need a driver that keeps people up at night. Okay, whether it's because they're excited that offshore renewable energy is going to really benefit and mitigate climate, to this is going to ruin my entire livelihood. It's a driver that motivates people and keeps them at the table. I also think you need to spend a lot more time on an informal process. When we did the SAMP, the ocean SAMP, we did not start writing for months, even though we had a 2-year period, because we were listening to what people's concerns were. We didn't develop the goals right away. We were listening to the issues. What was stirring the blood? What was the concern? And we were building the trust and that transparent process. I think we have to realize it's not just the plan and then you're done. The plan is just part of the journey. It's not the end. It's just part of the journey. And the important part is improving coastal management. And all those people that you're working with now are going to be there after the plan. And you need to continue to build that trust and that capacity, that governance towards our coast. So I think take a breath and learn from other people, and you're not alone. So in a nutshell, I would say those are some of the things that we've learned.
It does help a great deal if you have the buy-in of senior leaders in the community. And,
That's
and
right.
by that, not just talking about the governor, although obviously that's a very important one, but business leaders, civic leaders who are engaged and bought in and supportive, and saying, okay, if you are able to come up with this plan, we are going to implement it. That the stakes are too high here, and we are looking for a voice from the community saying that these are the changes that we are supportive of, and someone who's willing to take that, and then, to just be very frank, put the money behind it,
right.
get the budget going
Right.
behind it.
Right.
And then you've got, so those are elements
Yeah.
which
I think
build
that's right.
towards.
Yeah, that leadership piece we just saw constantly around the world, that someone needs to be willing to step up and say, this is the right thing for us to do, and we're gonna, it's tough. Giving birth is quite a trenchant analogy. I don't know, but it's something that's going to be good in the long run, and we're going to have to do it. You need that leadership.
Well, I just thank you all for doing the work that you're doing, because like Jeremy Jackson said last night, we've got these shifting baselines, and if we don't create a baseline and understand our baseline, there's no way we're going to know where we need to go in the future and to create that plan. So thank you so much for joining me today to discuss this important topic, and I just, have a great chow the rest of the week.
Thanks so much for having us.
Have some chow right now.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So keep it tuned right here on oceanslive.org for the best of chow and Capitol Hill Ocean Talk, and check out the schedule immediately following this broadcast for more information. So thanks again, and stay tuned next at 2:15 today, and right also after this for the rest of chow. Talk to you soon.